Artificial intelligence is one of the hottest trends taking the tech world by storm, but what exactly is artificial intelligence? That's what we're going to cover in today's training course. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And most, if not all, tech vendors in the space today are investing heavily in artificial intelligence. It's a subset of technology that's taken the world by storm. There's a lot of interest in ChatGPT and OpenAI and some of Google's investments in AI, Apple's investing in AI, Meta's investing in AI. So a lot of these big tech companies are investing heavily in AI, and a lot of us as consumers and as business users are using AI. But oftentimes I get asked the question, A, what is AI? And B, how are organizations actually using artificial intelligence to improve their operations? And that's what I want to talk about here in today's training video. Now, this training video is broken up into a number of different modules. I'm going to start off by talking about what exactly artificial intelligence is, as well as how it's affecting enterprise technologies here today. I'll also talk about the importance of data management, as well as how artificial intelligence is affecting careers in technology. And I'm also going to provide a keynote presentation at the end that talks about some case studies of how organizations throughout the world are actually using AI in their manufacturing and distribution operations. So let's start off by providing an overview of what exactly artificial intelligence is. I want to provide a basic breakdown of AI and machine learning and some of the different components of artificial intelligence. Now, as you're following along in this video, I also encourage you to download our 2024 Digital Transformation Report. It's a report we publish each year that covers a number of emerging trends and technologies that are meant to augment and supplement the information I'm going to talk about here today. You can download that report by scanning the QR code in front of you, or you can go to the description field below for the links. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are two trends and two technologies that many organizations turn to. It's something that's been around for a while, it's been developing for some time, but the question we often get from clients is what exactly is machine learning and what exactly is artificial intelligence? And that's what I want to provide an answer to here today. As I mentioned, machine learning and AI, or artificial intelligence, have been around for a long time. They're technically not the same thing, but they're often used interchangeably. And machine learning is generally viewed as a subset of artificial intelligence. And probably the simplest example of artificial intelligence and machine learning would be on your phone. If you use Siri or Alexa as a voice recognition type of command approach, that is oftentimes viewed as machine learning because it's learning your voice, it's learning the diction of the way you talk, and it also learns how to pick up on what it is you're looking for. And over time, the technology learns from its mistakes, and it learns to optimize and continuously improve how it recognizes your voice and how it addresses your commands, if you will. So that's a real basic consumer technology example of how machine learning and AI works. But when we look at enterprises in general and business technology, machine learning and artificial intelligence are also being incorporated into those technologies as well. And essentially what the technology does is it takes data and it takes business processes throughout your organization, and it learns from the data. It learns the patterns, it learns what's happening, it learns what is transpiring with some of the transactions and workflows and data sets that you have throughout your organization. And a predecessor to machine learning and AI was once known as predictive analytics. So predictive analytics would try to predict the future based on the past and looking at the processes and the data sets that your organization has. So machine learning and AI is an extension or an evolution of predictive analytics to where now it's more proactively learning to optimize and to make better sense and better use of data, to where it can actually help you make decisions, and in some cases make decisions for you as part of your organization. So I had mentioned the real simple example of AI and machine learning with your phone and the voice recognition on your phone. Within organizations, machine learning and AI is being built into enterprise technologies such as ERP systems, HCM systems, et cetera. And some examples of where we're starting to see machine learning and AI be used would be in situations like, for example, accounts payable processing. So if you're an accounts payable clerk, right now you may be manually approving and releasing payment for different invoices that you receive. Machine learning would enable you to automate that process to where it recognizes the normal transactions and normal processes, and it's smart enough to know and to learn where the anomalies are and where the potential red flags are. So in other words, instead of focusing on approving every invoice for payment, machine learning would automatically approve invoices that fall within a certain threshold, and it would learn to flag those invoices or those transactions that look out of line with history. So over time, it learns what normal means and what the thresholds and the different parameters are within your accounts payable processes, so that it can learn when to approve the processes and when to reject those invoices and to require human intervention. So that's one example. Another example is in supply chain management. A lot of ERP systems and supply chain management technologies will take data from throughout the supply chain to try and anticipate where potential bottlenecks might be, to where you might need to shift your production to other vendors or to other parts of the world. It can start to recognize peaks in demand to where it might put strains on your supply chain, so that even things that humans can't anticipate, your technology is learning to anticipate based on past history and experience. And the longer you use that technology, the more likely it is to help optimize your supply chain. Another example of a use case of how machine learning and AI is used in many organizations is in helping forecast demand and looking at different data points, both within the organization and outside the organization, to figure out and determine what the things are that are going to drive demand up and what might cause demand to be softer than expected. And that's a way for technology to really learn and to anticipate how your demand is going to look from your customers, which then also feeds into the supply chain management and the accounts payable process that I mentioned earlier as well. So these are just three real basic, simple examples. It's not simple technology, but they're basic examples that might be relatable to you as an organization of how machine learning and AI can help enable some of your business processes via this new technology. Now, a caveat and a prerequisite to effective machine learning and AI is going to be to have good data. If you don't have good data within your organization, if your data is corrupt, if the data is not accurate, then your machine learning and your AI is going to be inaccurate as well. So data is always important to any sort of technology initiative, but it's especially important if you're truly going to take advantage of these machine learning and AI capabilities. Now, this goes for not only the initial migration of your data into the system in the first place, but it also involves and requires you as an organization to ensure that your employees are maintaining that data well and keeping the data clean. So in other words, you don't want to just move the data over to your new system and then your end users and employees are corrupting the data, in which case the machine learning and AI is going to be as reliable as your dirty data might be. So it's really important to not only have clean data brought over to the new technology, but also to make sure that over time you're basing your machine learning and AI functions on data that's being maintained and preserved and ideally optimized over time. So having an effective data strategy is a very important predecessor and prerequisite to taking full advantage of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now, while data is very important in ensuring that you take full advantage of machine learning and AI, what's even more important and the biggest requirement in order to take advantage of machine learning and AI is organizational change management. So in other words, ensuring that you're helping people, employees within your organization, navigate their way through this post-machine learning and AI world. And what I mean by that is it's one thing to say that we've got technology that can help automate some processes and help create this machine learning environment, but it's another thing to actually change your processes and change your people to enable that technology. We see a lot of organizations that have the capabilities technologically to take advantage of machine learning and artificial intelligence, but people resist the change. And if you think about the source of resistance, it's because people are afraid. People are afraid of the fact that now technology can do what many people have spent their entire careers doing. Now you're automating that through technology. And in many cases, machine learning and AI is creating a learning environment and an optimized environment that's even more effective than what humans can do. And that's very scary if you've built an entire career or your whole sense of self-worth is based on doing those processes yourself. So it's very important to redefine what people's roles are. It's not enough just to say we're going to put in machine learning and AI and we'll figure out the rest later. We need to redefine what people are going to do in parallel with this machine learning and AI world. And so it may be a matter of assigning new responsibilities. It may be a matter of taking the inputs or managing the exceptions from the machine learning and focusing on more decision-making and more strategic business processes. And that, on the other hand, can be very exciting for people when they realize that we're going to let a machine handle some of the more mundane processes, and we're going to let you, the human or the employee, are going to handle these new tasks and responsibilities and what your role is going to look like with these new tool sets that might be available to you. So just to build on the example I talked about before with accounts payable processing and the machine learning there focused on kicking back exceptions to the humans rather than the massive volumes of day-to-day approvals, now we have to figure out what that accounts payable clerk is going to do with their time. In addition to managing exceptions, maybe there's more strategic focus on procurement processes or payment terms or things that can help the company from a strategic perspective. Those are the sorts of things we have to figure out, is what are people's jobs going to look like in the future, and how can we help migrate people to this future state in a way that's not going to create too much fear and anxiety around using these new technologies. So the more we can focus on organizational change management, the more likely it is we're going to be able to take full advantage of technologies like machine learning and AI.
So that hopefully provides you an overview of what AI is, what the definition is, and what some of the different components of it are. But now it is important to think about how is AI affecting enterprise technology, more specifically ERP systems. That's the major core back office system that a lot of organizations use to run their businesses. And AI is something that's not just a standalone technology, it's something that's being embedded in other types of technologies that already exist. So in this next module, we're going to dive into how AI is impacting and improving ERP systems as we know them.
Now, the first way that AI is changing and improving ERP software as we know it is that it's allowing organizations to finally take advantage of all this data they've been accumulating for years and decades in many cases. If you think about organizations going back to the 60s, we're starting to automate their business processes, starting to automate their data capture, and certainly that trend accelerated in the 70s and 80s into the 90s. And I'd say starting since the 90s, most organizations were on some sort of electronic computer system starting to collect data. So you've got at least 30 to 40 years plus of organizational history that a lot of organizations have that have been around for a long time, but they haven't known what to do with this data. They've had dirty data, they've had trouble mapping it, migrating it to new systems as they've done upgrades. So that's been a problem in the past, but now with AI, if we can get our data right, it gives us a way to actually make use of that data. So instead of just having reams and reams of transactional data going back 30 years, now we can use AI to make more sense and more meaning of it. We can also use predictive analytics and machine learning and other aspects and subcomponents of AI to help us predict the future and understand what might happen based on some of our historic data. And it's not just our internal data that AI within ERP software is allowing us to take advantage of, it's also third-party sources of data. So if we can look at external macroeconomic indicators or weather patterns or other things that might affect our business, we can take those data sets and integrate it with our core internal data and then use AI models to help predict the future. So as more ERP software vendors continue to build up their AI capabilities, more of them are going to find ways to improve the way organizations are getting value from AI. I'd say the lowest hanging fruit for AI within ERP software systems and the deployments that go along with them, as we know it today, is going to be generative and conversational AI. And if you don't know what that is, it's essentially the component of AI that allows you to talk to the system or type a question within a system and have a conversation rather than having to go into a system, go to a specific report, or go to a specific set of transactions to find the data you're looking for. If any of you have tried or used ChatGPT, for example, that's an example of conversational AI. You can type within ChatGPT a question or ask it to analyze something and it's going to come back with a response. You don't have to go Google a bunch of results. You don't have to go into your ERP system to pull a bunch of data. And this is where a lot of ERP software vendors are starting. They're starting with these conversational AI models that sit on top of their ERP platform and the ERP database to allow you to interact with the system in a different way. So you don't have to memorize where you need to go, what screen you need to go to, what field you need to fill out. You can type in a set of questions or a description of what you're looking for, and that conversational AI interface will allow you to retrieve that information accordingly. So as we look to where we are right now in the maturity curve of AI within ERP software, conversational and generative AI is probably the furthest along, and that's where a lot of software vendors are providing some capabilities there. So look for this as a way to really automate and streamline and change the way employees use and interact with your systems in your data going forward. Now, in addition to generative and conversational AI, there's other creative uses of AI that are being used by ERP software vendors and some of the more innovative companies that are deploying ERP systems. One example is just being able to analyze data in unique ways. So if we've always had a report that was run a certain way or showed a certain set of data, not only can we now just conversationally ask the AI interface for that same information without having to go create a report manually, now we could ask it to go a step further and create a graph that compares different subsets of data, or create a visual representation in a way that we haven't done before. So it really allows us and allows employees within our organizations to think outside the box of how we could be using these ERP systems and the data within them to capture information and analyze information and create outputs in different ways than we ever have. And this is where it becomes really important to not just deploy AI and assume that people are going to figure out how to do that. This is where, when we define our future state, we need to be creative about figuring out how are we going to use the AI capabilities either within our ERP system or a third-party AI solution that allows us to provide that information and those capabilities to our employees. So in other words, we can't assume that our employees are just going to figure out and come to the right answer by accident. We have to paint a vision for them of how they might use AI to get to information faster and to be more creative in how they deploy and use AI within their ERP systems. Now, it's important to recognize that as we're talking about ERP software and AI, it's not just the AI capabilities that are being built within the ERP systems themselves that you have as an option. You also have the option of a standalone AI solution. And there's a lot of AI vendors out there, a lot of upstarts and startups that are creating AI solutions that can be bolted onto or worked within a certain technical landscape. For example, you have AI solutions that are allowing you to access data from multiple systems, and it's allowing you to analyze that data, create outputs, and create some of the analyses and predictive analytics and some of the forecasting that AI affords, but it's not necessarily something you have to rely on the ERP software vendor to provide. You can also go find third-party AI providers that can provide some of those capabilities, especially if you're working with a software vendor that's still building those capabilities. It doesn't quite have the AI maturity as a standalone AI solution. So when you're evaluating ERP systems, it may be worth not only looking at the AI capabilities of whatever system you're looking at, but also look at the third-party AI solutions that might work with that ERP system, as well as other legacy systems that you are going to retain for a short period or perhaps even permanently on top of any new ERP system you might deploy. So be sure to consider your full options when you're deploying ERP software in terms of how you might use AI. Now, what's really interesting about AI and ERP software is that it sort of triangulates itself or comes together with another trend in the market, which is the movement to the cloud. ERP software vendors are, for the most part, en masse moving to the cloud. They've transitioned their on-premise legacy systems or are in the process of transitioning those systems to cloud solutions that are largely rewrites of that legacy software. And the beauty here, in addition to other benefits of deploying cloud technology, is it really enables AI in a way that we haven't seen before. So if you think about your old legacy systems and some of the security issues you might have had and some of the silos of data, the lack of interconnectivity that you might have had, the dirty data, it didn't really lend itself well to really capitalize on AI in the way we can today. Fast forward to cloud solutions now, you've got a standard data model, standard business processes, less likelihood of corrupting the data because now you have standard processes to manage that data, and you've got all your data now presumably in one place in the cloud. And that's where AI really shines, because now AI can be used and rely upon more reliable data to help fuel the models and help provide information and help provide value that AI can afford. The other component that's really interesting is as we look to third-party data sources, especially as we look at things like Internet of Things and wearables and other devices that are capturing data outside of our four walls of our organization. Now with cloud computing, we can capture that data and integrate that data with our internal data to further enable those AI models. So there's a lot happening in the cloud space that is really accelerating the trend towards AI, And it's really a sort of a perfect storm or a perfect backdrop for AI to really take off and to continue to gain adoption and mainstream use within the ERP software space, which is largely why the ERP software vendors are investing so heavily in AI right now.
So that provided a little bit of background of how AI is being embedded in ERP systems and how AI is impacting and improving the way ERP systems are being used by organizations throughout the world. But let's also talk about how AI could be creating a greater good or improving society as we know it today. It's fun to think about how artificial intelligence is not only improving our daily lives as business users or consumers, but also just society in general. How is AI affecting the world as we know it? And that could be a great way to sort of give us that vision of how AI and the ways we use AI day to day, how might that get scaled to a broader level to improve the world as we know it? So let's dive into how AI is improving the world as we know it today.
Artificial intelligence is something that's been emerging for a while now, but it's just now catching on. And a lot of organizations are looking hard at how they can use AI to make their organizations better. But as someone that grew up in the 80s and grew up with movies like Terminator and war games and things of that nature, there's been a sort of underlying fear of new technology that a lot of us have, including artificial intelligence. For example, in Terminator, AI and robots aren't necessarily a good thing. They can be perceived as a bad thing. So what I want to do today is sort of shift gears from that mentality. So rather than talk about the perceived negativity of AI or the potential negativity of AI, I want to talk today about how AI just might be able to save the world. So for many, we might perceive artificial intelligence as something that's going to jeopardize or threaten our jobs. In other words, if we can automate our jobs or do things that humans typically would have done in the past in terms of the way they think and learn and that sort of thing, that could be perceived as a negative thing or something that could jeopardize someone's job. But another way to look at this is to say, rather than creating job loss, it could actually create job opportunity. What I mean by this is if we can automate manual parts of our jobs or things that don't require a lot of human thought or interaction, then what if we could spend more of our time doing more strategic activities and more thinking and planning and decision making? So if you think about your organization that you work with or for, there's probably a lot of manual work that gets done with spreadsheets and collecting data, and out on the shop floor, there's a lot of manual processes still happening. But what if AI could take some of that away and make us as humans more strategic and more decision making? Could that lead to better fulfillment and better job satisfaction? Those are some things to think about as you think about how AI might be able to improve the employee experience within organizations throughout the world. Another way that AI may be able to change the world is to provide a better customer experience. In fact, we're already seeing this in many ways and we may not even realize it. So artificial intelligence is used by Amazon, by Alibaba, by Facebook, by Instagram. All these consumer brands and products that we interact with every day are using AI to make our experience in life better. Same goes true for the potential for other types of organizations. If AI can be used to better anticipate demand and better match supply with demand or better match our product or service offering with what clients' anticipated needs are, all that stuff can make the world a better place for us as consumers and as customers of other organizations. So this is an area where we're actually probably further along than many of us realize, in that so many organizations are already using AI. However, it's just scratched the surface in terms of adoption by organizations. As you start to look at all the different organizations throughout the world that are not yet using AI, you can just imagine how powerful that would be if more organizations did do that to make their customer experience better. So taking this concept of customer experience one step further is the concept of supply chain management. In the 2020s here today, many of us as consumers are experiencing firsthand supply chain bottlenecks and shortages and problems. And part of this is because organizations don't have the right data, they don't have the right visibility into their supply chains, and they're not fully maximizing the use of technology to better anticipate demand so that we can match supply to meet that demand. So the way this helps us as consumers is that we have less material outages. We have less products that are missing from the store shelves. We're actually able to get products faster. We're not having to wait on new cars. We're not having to wait 12 or 18 months, as is the case with many auto manufacturers. AI may not be able to solve all the problems of geopolitical issues and pandemic-related issues, but AI can do a better job of helping us navigate these curveballs and uncertainties in the future. So look to AI to really transform the way supply chains are running today into something that's more suitable to the future, that makes our lives better as consumers and provides an upside to organizations in the way they manage their supply chains as well. Now, as we sort of work our way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs here and work our way from employee and customer experience and now talk about healthcare and our own health, AI is a great tool that is already making inroads in the healthcare space. And if you think about healthcare in general, it's such a big, broad discipline that involves a lot of science and a lot of data that no one person is going to be able to possibly learn on their own. And even collectively within a hospital or a healthcare organization, chances are there's some limited knowledge and blind spots that humans have. And so AI can be a great way to pull together all the data and science that's being advanced every day throughout the world to provide better outcomes for people looking for better healthcare. It also is a way to eliminate human error potentially, to where misdiagnosis or missing certain symptoms or certain root causes of the symptoms might get overlooked by humans today. AI might be a good way to help anticipate and predict what the problems are and ultimately provide a more tailored plan to overcome those problems for better outcomes. So look to healthcare as a possibility for a way that AI can completely transform the world and make it a better place. So just as healthcare is a broad, complex, data-driven discipline, so too is the whole concept of climate change. And many of us in the world are concerned about climate change. We want to fix it. We want to do our part. We want to better understand it. And there's so much data, science, and interpretation that goes into understanding climate change that it too is subject to human error. It's subject to politics. It's subject to human biases and all the different things that can undermine analysis and solutions. So AI could be a great way to take the mass amounts of data we have about the climate, the world around us, how humans are affecting climate, what other things externally from humans are affecting climate, and really give us better visibility and understanding and learning into what we can do to improve climate change. So this is a sort of a pie in the sky example of how AI could be used to make the world a better place. We're nowhere near to using AI in this capacity, but it is an area that you might see AI transform in the future to make the world a better place.
Now, so far we've talked about the definition of AI, what it is, how it's affecting ERP systems and improving ERP systems. We've also talked about how it is changing the world as we know it. But now let's talk about how we actually take AI and some of these possibilities that AI provides us, and how do we create a strategy to actually use artificial intelligence within our organizations. A lot of times it can be overwhelming. You think about all these different use cases that we're going to get to later in this video. It can be overwhelming to think about how artificial intelligence might be used on a small incremental scale in the short term, and also how AI might be used in a more quantum leap, massive process improvement type of initiative within our business. So what I want to do here now is talk about how to lay out a strategy for your AI initiatives to really give you some grounding and a framework that you could use to create a path forward.
The really cool thing about AI, and also the overwhelming thing about AI, is that there's a multitude of ways that you could be using AI. A lot of different use cases, a lot of emerging ways that you could be creatively looking to leverage artificial intelligence throughout your operations. And in that plethora of options comes a certain amount of complexity and confusion and overwhelming priorities. And so what we need to do is, first of all, define what our strategy and objectives are as an organization. Where do we think the highest value is going to come from by using AI? We could probably use AI throughout our entire organization and find hundreds or thousands of ways to use AI to make our businesses better. And maybe we will at some point in the future. But to start, you want to take sort of a phased incremental approach to figure out how can you start using AI now, and how can you start to bake AI into your operations. And the best way to do that is to look at your overall corporate strategy, goals, and objectives, and determine where AI has the most potential to add the most value in the least amount of time. The beauty with this approach too is that it doesn't necessarily mean you need to replace all of your systems and go through a massive digital transformation. The beauty of AI is that you can leverage pockets of technology to build on the systems and the data and the platforms that you've already built within your organization. Not to say that you may not eventually replace those current legacy systems, but AI can be used right now to make full use of some of those systems. So to get there, it makes the most sense to start by defining your strategy, goals, and objectives as an organization, and then define how AI can best support those strategy, goals, and objectives. And that's what I'll talk about next throughout this video. Once you've defined what your overall strategy, goals, and objectives are as an organization, and maybe you have some general ideas of how AI might help enable those strategy, goals, and objectives,
Now you start to look at your business processes within those areas where you might be able to provide the most value throughout your organization. For example, let's assume that you're having trouble with stockouts, inventory stockouts, and you're not able to fill customer orders as high as you'd like. AI could be a great way to provide better capabilities and better insights to help you better anticipate customer demand and better handle your inventory management. So if that's the case, in this example, you would want to define your current state business processes within the realm of inventory management and perhaps customer order management, and define what the current state is and where the major pain points and inefficiencies are. Once you've done that, then you can start to define sort of a what-if scenario. What if we had AI tools that, for example, would give us a more accurate demand forecast from customers? If we had AI that could do that, what would that mean for our inventory management? And what would that mean for our overall production schedule? Things of that nature. So you'd want to look at those business processes as they stand today, assess where the strengths and the weaknesses are, the efficiencies and inefficiencies are, and then start to think creatively about how could we possibly use AI tools to give us more improved business processes. Artificial intelligence is a relatively new technology. It's actually been around for a lot longer than many of us realize, but compared to ERP systems or other types of technologies, it's relatively new. It's just been really on the forefront of the mainstream just in the last few years. And as such, most of your employees are still probably unfamiliar with how AI can be used. So it's not enough to just simply put AI in the hands of your employees and assume that because they have AI tools, they're going to be able to improve the business processes themselves or do their jobs better themselves. Instead, what you have to do is paint a picture and define how people's jobs are going to look in this post-AI environment that we're deploying. So in the example before where I was talking about better anticipating customer demand using AI tools, now that we've defined where the processes are broken and where they could be more efficient, now we need to define how that affects different people within the organization and how different people within those specific processes are going to use AI in the future to make their jobs more effective and more efficient. So if I'm a customer service rep and I take orders from customers, there's probably certain things that I can start doing to use AI to make my job more efficient, but I need to be shown how AI will make my job more efficient. So there's a lot of planning and design that needs to happen up front before we roll out these tool sets to employees to ensure that we've designed their roles and their jobs and their job descriptions to take better advantage of these tools. By doing that, we're going to ensure that when we do roll out this new technology, people are actually going to use it, and it's not just going to be a pipe dream of AI-enabled processes. It's actually going to be something that we're showing how people are going to use that in their day-to-day jobs. Just as is the case with any sort of technology, you don't want to deploy technology just to deploy new technology. You want to do it because it delivers measurable business value. And that's the way you're actually going to get the business value out of your technology investments, is if you actually measure it. So when we're deploying AI, we want to look at ways that we can define what the performance measures are today for how we're performing and what they should be for the future, what our target is for the future, so that we can actually measure the value and look to see how AI is actually helping our business. In the example of inventory accuracy that I talked about earlier in this video, we might say that we're going to start measuring the variance in projected customer demand versus actual customer demand, or projected inventory levels versus actual inventory levels, order fulfillment rates. How are they improving as a result of AI? And then that's going to allow us to continuously improve so that we're constantly adding new ways and optimizing the way we do business and ensuring that we're taking full advantage of the power and the capabilities of artificial intelligence. So setting those performance measures and the targets that go along with that are something that's very important to do as part of your AI strategy and roadmap. Now, once you've done all the work that we've defined here today, you've defined the strategy and objectives of your organization and how AI might support that. You've defined your current future state processes. You've defined the organization. You've defined the performance measures. Now we define what is the roadmap going forward. What's the best option for us to accomplish all the things that we've defined so far? And this is where we start to get into things like, are we going to deploy a new ERP system that has AI capabilities embedded with it? Are we going to deploy separate standalone AI systems that maybe integrate back to our legacy systems? Is there some sort of interim solution that will hold us over until we have better back office systems? Do we need to clean up our data to take full advantage of AI, which I would say the answer to that is probably yes for most of you. So those are the types of things we have to ask ourselves, and we have to look at all the different paths we have to go forward. What are the different things that we can do to start leveraging AI? And the beauty of this, as I mentioned at the top of the video, is first of all, this is not just a one and done sort of proposition. AI is something that continues to evolve at a breakneck speed over time. So the way we see and use AI today is going to look very different than how we see and use it 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
So the beauty is it's not set in stone. We're just getting started on this AI journey. The other beauty is that we don't necessarily need to replace all of our systems. We don't need to go replace all of our ERP systems or all of our financial systems. We can start to leverage what we have, maybe clean up the data in those systems. But once we have good data, we can start using AI to really give us a sort of a better user interface and a better analytics tool to help us get better value out of the systems we already have. And maybe that's a good interim step until you do find that it's time to replace your systems. So these are just a few examples of options and paths you might consider. But regardless, you want to look at what your different options are, compare the cost benefit, the pros and cons, and the risks of each of those scenarios, and ultimately lay out and recommend the roadmap that makes the most sense for your organization.
So that's an overview of how to create an AI strategy. And in that module, we talked about the several different work streams and parallel activities that need to support an overarching AI strategy that gives you that sort of long-term view of how you might be deploying artificial intelligence within your organization. But there's also another important piece that we talked about within that module that I want to dive into in more detail here, and that's data management. Data management is a crucial input into effective artificial intelligence, and without good data, you're not going to have good artificial intelligence outputs. In other words, artificial intelligence is only as smart as the data you feed it. And so the question becomes, for a lot of organizations, how do we manage data, and why is data management so important? And that's what I want to talk about here in this next module. The first reason why data management and data in general is so important is because today's business intelligence and analytics is highly dependent on clean data. So an organization that has dirty data or data that's inaccurate is going to also have analytics and outputs and business intelligence that is also inaccurate. So with the advent of analytics and the increasing value of analytics, including, by the way, predictive analytics that helps predict the future, it's more important than ever that organizations have clean data. And this is why so many organizations focus their efforts during digital transformation on cleaning up their data, getting rid of the duplicate data, making sure they've got solid master data in place, and getting all that in place before they move it over to their new modern ERP systems or whatever technologies they might be deploying. So in order to get the full value out of analytics and business intelligence, it's more important than ever that organizations have clean data and data governance to support that. Now, we talked about why data is so important for analytics and business intelligence. That's sort of the traditional reporting view of the world, where you go in, you run a report, and you get an output that's based on what you hope is solid, accurate data. But if we take that concept one step further and start to look at even more modern emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, for example, it becomes even more imperative that we have solid data governance in place. If you think about what AI needs to be successful to make sense of data and to give recommendations that humans might have manually done in the past, AI algorithms need good data and they crave data. So the better data and the higher volumes of data we can give these AI algorithms that are being baked into modern technologies, the more value we're going to get out of it and the more advanced we're going to be as an organization. So in order to take full advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning and some other emerging technologies, it's more important than ever that we have solid data management practices and processes in place. There's a popular trend and concept in the world today called Industry 4.0. There's also something called Internet of Things, or IoT. These are two very interrelated, supplementary sorts of concepts. And essentially what these two trends point to is the modernization and the automation and the data collection within today's modern factory. Now, I have a YouTube video on my channel that talks about what is Industry 4.0. You can find that video right here if you want to dive more into what is Industry 4.0 and what does it mean to your organization. So check out this video here if you want to dive into it. But in general, what it means is that organizations are more than ever capturing data on the manufacturing shop floor and warehouses, even out in trucks, when trucks are taking products and distributing them to customers. Even customers themselves are capturing data on their side of things. There's just been a proliferation of how much data is being captured by organizations throughout a supply chain, throughout a manufacturing facility, throughout a warehouse. And what that's doing is it's creating an opportunity for us to collect that data and to make sense of it. But again, in order to make good sense of it, we have to know what to do with the data. We have to make sure the data is accurate. We have to have solid data governance and data management in place. So this is another reason why data management is more important than ever, is just proliferation of data from a bunch of different sources throughout the supply chain of most organizations. So for that reason, you want to make sure you have solid data governance to support Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, and some of these other trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. Now, one of the hidden game changers with artificial intelligence and data collection in general is the movement to the cloud. So in other words, as more organizations move their applications and their data sets to the cloud, that's giving software vendors and tech companies access to that data if you let them, if you give them permission to use the data. It's giving them access to be able to model their algorithms based on a larger subset of data. So for example, if I'm an ERP software vendor and I have 10,000 customers that are all hosting their applications in the cloud and they're capturing their data in the cloud, and if they give me permission to access that, or at least for my AI algorithm to access that data, now suddenly I'm smarter as an AI algorithm. I have all these different data sets from 10,000 different customers, which is just a mass amount of data that's just going to make AI more valuable to more organizations. So again, with this proliferation of AI and the advancements in emerging technologies like AI, combined with the fact that we have this cloud migration, or these companies that are moving to the cloud at a breakneck speed, now you can see how this all comes together to put even more significance and importance on data management and data governance. Now, there's two parts of data governance and data management. One is the actual data itself that you move over to a new system, or if you're going to keep it in the same system, how you clean up that data and make sure the data is accurate. That's one piece of it. But then when you go into production and people start touching the data and using it day to day within the system, the question becomes, how do you ensure that the data stays accurate and that humans don't interfere and disrupt or corrupt the data? And that's the million-dollar question. So it's not only cleaning up the data, moving the data over in a cleansed kind of a way, it's also making sure that you have internal controls and processes that ensure that people don't corrupt the data. And you can do this through security profiles, making sure that only certain people can access or touch the data. You can do it through centralization of data management so that only certain groups or certain individuals within the organization can create master data or make changes to master data. Those are just a couple examples of data governance processes that you want to have in place. And then a third one would be any step along the way that's touching data or impacting or interfacing with data. You want to make sure you have clearly defined processes and operating procedures to ensure that people are well trained and well versed on what they need to do to contribute to clean data and protecting this important company asset. So when you're thinking about data governance and data management, it's important to not only think about the data itself, but also the processes and the human interaction with the data to ensure that it stays clean and it's providing the maximum amount of value to your organization. So I hope this has given you some insights and guidance and some things to think about as you think about your digital transformation and how data fits within it. And more importantly, helps you figure out how you might get more value out of this important company asset, which, by the way, data doesn't show up on a company balance sheet. It oftentimes isn't viewed as a formal company asset, but it's becoming increasingly more important as time goes on for the reasons I mentioned in this video, not to mention the fact that data is oftentimes the key point of tribal knowledge that's being consolidated into technology. So we've talked about why data management is so important and how that can integrate with an overarching AI strategy. But let's talk about how AI is actually being used by manufacturing and distribution companies. Even if you're not in the manufacturing and distribution space, or if you're in a different industry vertical, you can still learn a lot from how other companies are leveraging AI and some of the early use cases that are emerging in this industry. So what I want to do in this next module is dive into how AI is being used within manufacturing and distribution, and hopefully this gives you some ideas on how you might start thinking about different use cases for how you use AI within your organization.
The first and most common way that we're seeing manufacturers and distributors use AI right now is through the use of chatbots, AI-based chatbots. And this is where essentially you've got a user interface that you're engaging with and talking to via text versus having to go to different menu systems or different screens or different systems to find the information you're looking for. So for example, if you want to know how much inventory you have in your Boise, Idaho plant, you could type a question to the AI chatbot that says, how much inventory do I have of this particular SKU or product within our Boise warehouse? And it would spit back a response to you and give you real-time visibility into what exactly you have in inventory in that particular location. And there's a whole plethora of ways that you could be using AI chatbots, but that's one of the most common ways we're seeing manufacturing and distribution companies start to ease into AI. And one of the things I really like about chatbots is, first of all, not only are people pretty comfortable with it or getting more comfortable with it because of ChatGPT and some of the consumer-facing AI tools that are out there right now, but also because It's a way to leverage AI without necessarily having to replace all of your back office systems to get that competency. So you could have legacy systems, maybe even on-premise systems or homegrown systems that you could be building an AI chatbot on top of, or leveraging an AI chatbot to gather the information you need and to give you the information you need via more of a conversational AI format. So AI chatbots are one of the most common ways, if not the most common way, that manufacturers and distribution companies are using AI right now. One of the most difficult parts of being a manufacturing and distribution organization is estimating what kind of demand your customers are going to expect from you. So in other words, having the right inventory at the right place at the right time without having too much inventory in the locations that you need them. And the beauty of AI now is that it can take mass amounts of data, look at your history, look at projected customer trends, look at macro data sets, and it can start to project what kind of demand it expects to see based on all the data that you've gathered as an organization. And the good news for manufacturing and distribution companies that have been around for a long time is you probably have mass amounts of data that AI models could use to help you predict demand more accurately going forward. And as you know, if you can predict demand accurately and in a timely fashion, that's going to allow you to optimize inventory and save money and generate more revenue longer term. So optimizing customer demand is one of the early use cases we're seeing with the use of AI within manufacturing and distribution. As we back up from customer demand and look at what we need to do to satisfy customer demand, one of the big things we have to do is obviously plan out our production. If we have an accurate customer demand model, now we can plan our production using AI models to figure out when we should be sourcing raw materials or components, when we should be running certain products on the production line, when we need to have certain production runs completed. All those sorts of things can be optimized now through the use of AI, because AI can take these mass amounts of data, much more so than a spreadsheet or a human brain can handle, and give us a better sense of when production should happen and how that production should happen. Another area that AI is helping manufacturers and distribution organizations is to optimize labor cost. For a lot of you watching, you're using temporary or hourly, maybe overtime resources. So every hour of labor that you're using costs you money, obviously. If you're able to optimize how you're deploying labor throughout your manufacturing and distribution facilities, that can be a material impact to your bottom line. And so what organizations are doing is that they're using their anticipated customer demand, their anticipated production schedules, it's all coming from AI now, and using that to further define how they can potentially be using labor and optimizing labor costs in their production processes. One client organization that I recently spoke to that's in the manufacturing space said that they used AI to help them go from 8% variation on their projected labor costs to less than 2% variation. So that's a 6 percentage point increase of optimization of labor costs. And for an organization that in this case was spending $10 million a week on labor costs, that 6 percentage point swing in accuracy for your labor costs can be very material. So this is one example of how organizations in manufacturing and distribution are using AI to optimize their labor costs throughout the production process. A lot of manufacturing and distribution organizations have complex supply chains, complex logistics networks involving shipments and containers and trucks and all different sorts of transportation to get their products from the manufacturing shop floor to the warehouse to the customer, and in some cases getting them from overseas from another country. So when you have mass numbers of fleets and trucks and ships and shipments out there throughout your supply chain, any sort of optimization you can do is going to come in handy. And the beauty of AI as it stands today is it's allowing organizations to better anticipate what their distribution and logistics network needs to look like and to optimize those distribution and logistics networks. It also allows you to make sure that you're optimizing routes as you're making shipments or deliveries. It can help save on fuel costs as well. So there's a lot of secondary advantages to using AI to help you better plan and optimize your distribution and logistics networks. Most manufacturing and distribution organizations are capital intensive. They have machines that break. They have machines that need repair. They have trucks that need repair. They have robotics and other manufacturing equipment, shop floor equipment that needs service and repair and sometimes breaks. And if you can anticipate when and how and where maintenance needs to happen, then that's going to save you time and money. It's going to save you a lot of issues that you might have with having production downtime because a machine breaks, or not being able to ship a product because part of your fleet of trucks isn't operable. So if we can use all the data we have throughout our entire supply chain to really understand not only the demands and the pressures we're placing on our different capital assets, We can also start to anticipate when those capital assets might need attention, either maintenance, repair, or some sort of optimization. And that's where AI can help. It can help us anticipate better than humans can, or better than an Excel spreadsheet, on where and how and when we think we need to repair or service some sort of asset within our manufacturing and distribution network.
So now that we've talked about some of the different use cases for how AI is being used in manufacturing and distribution, we've talked about the AI strategy that you might deploy to define an overarching plan and roadmap for your AI adoption within your organization. It can also be helpful to talk about AI and how it affects your career. If you're a CIO or a consultant or somehow involved in the technology space in any capacity, you're probably wondering, well, how is AI going to affect my career, and what does it mean for my future career prospects? And that's what we want to talk about here in this module.
One of the questions that we often hear from people in the job market is, how will artificial intelligence affect job opportunity? More specifically, will it reduce opportunity and in some cases reduce jobs and result in job loss? So in other words, we have to understand, will artificial intelligence eliminate jobs and make it harder for us to coexist with technology in the workforce? I remember when I was a kid, back in the 1980s, my parents worked at Digital Equipment Corporation, which was a computer manufacturer. And at the time, there was a big movement towards robotics in the manufacturing shop floor. And this is when computers were still manufactured in the United States. So we saw robotics taking over a lot of manufacturing, not just where my parents worked, but in automotive organizations and other manufacturing organizations. And there was an underlying fear that robots were going to take all of our jobs. I still remember as a kid thinking that maybe there wouldn't be as much opportunity when I entered the workforce because robots might take over my job. Now, certainly that fear wasn't helped by movies like Terminator and other futuristic types of movies that portrayed the dark side of technology, but it's something that has sort of permeated our society over time. Now, fast forward to the 2020s, and artificial intelligence, which by the way has been around for quite some time, but is just now gaining that mainstream adoption that's been lacking before. And we have the same fear again. We're wondering, how will artificial intelligence affect our jobs? Now let's look at it from the perspective of blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs. Blue-collar jobs being shop floor workers, warehouse workers, delivery drivers, basically physical and manual labor. In the case of robotics, that was the work group that was most threatened or potentially threatened by automation and job loss. However, with artificial intelligence, the more direct impact is likely to be on white-collar workers, people that are working in offices, working with technology, working with data, working with computers and other things to do their jobs. And artificial intelligence now has the opportunity to automate what was often done by humans. And there's a lot of different examples here of how AI can automate people's jobs. Even if you just look at the opportunity to write a paper for school, or to come up with creative ideas for a title for a deliverable you might be working on, or to help you write any other sort of artifact. You can see how artificial intelligence can automate a lot of different jobs. So I think white-collar jobs are the ones that are going to be most impacted. So the question becomes, is this going to be a positive impact or a negative impact or both? And that's what I'll cover through the rest of this video. Now, if we put a positive spin on the impact of artificial intelligence on jobs, we will likely conclude that there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity for us as white-collar workers to potentially do more higher value work than we've done in the past, because AI will automate much of the manual grunt work that we used to have to do. If you think about the average office, the average organization with its office workers and all the manual paper-based processes, the Excel spreadsheets, the analysis of data, the gathering of data, the consolidation of data, manipulation of data, all these manual things that organizations spend a lot of time doing, AI now has an opportunity to automate those jobs. And what that means for someone, for example, in finance or accounting, might be that they spend less time going out and looking for data and more time analyzing data, understanding data, making strategic decisions, and doing their job better, for lack of a better word. You also look at another example, which is demand planning. Within organizations, especially manufacturers and those that sell a physical product, there's typically people or departments that are focused on estimating what demand will be so that they can produce the right amount of product at the right time. And historically, this has been a tribal knowledge-based sort of process. It requires a lot of consolidation of data, a lot of going out and finding data, both internally and with third parties, to look at macroeconomic trends and things of that nature. But now with AI, there's suddenly an opportunity to automate some of that, to at least take a first stab at what demand might look like. And in both of these cases, the finance and accounting example and the demand planning example, it may sound like that's going to take away jobs. But really what it'll do is allow those people to do their jobs better and to focus on really scaling their knowledge across more and using better information and really augmenting artificial intelligence with the human knowledge and the tribal knowledge that goes along with that. I'm going to come back to that point here in a moment. But in general, I see artificial intelligence as an opportunity to really upskill and to increase the competencies of the average worker that's dealing with artificial intelligence. Now, I alluded to this a moment ago, but I want to dive into more detail. And that is the convergence of artificial intelligence and the human intervention and the human mind. And they can't exist without each other. So in other words, artificial intelligence, as it stands right now, can't really exist without human intervention. And I don't mean human intervention as though AI is broken or needs oversight, although that is the case in many cases, but more so it's the combination of human knowledge and things that can't be replicated in AI, and of course the deep, rich amounts of data that exist in artificial intelligence models. Now, in the previous segment, I talked about an example or a use case of finance and demand planning and two functions that could be enabled further by artificial intelligence. Well, let's unpack a third example here, and that is software development or software configuration. If you're a techie, if you build software, configure software, implement software, there's a lot you do that's really focused on creating code and creating things within a computer that have some sort of outcome that you're looking for from a business perspective. Now, there's a lot of time spent on doing that coding, creating configuration and whatnot. So back to the point here is, how does AI and human knowledge come together to create a better software product? And the end result here might be that AI can take a first pass at creating some of the code or creating some of the configurations or some of the integration that humans typically had to do manually. And it allows the humans to really use that as a starting point, modify it and build on it, and get further faster than they would without AI. Not only that, but AI, in this case, in this example, allows developers to think more about the business impact or the outcome they're looking for, the business process, the user acceptance, whether or not the business can actually use the software that's being built. And it allows technology people to shift their focus from building technology to building technology that can work. So this is just one example of how the convergence of AI and human intervention can create something that's greater than what's been created in the past without artificial intelligence. So now the question is, does all this mean that artificial intelligence leads to more opportunity or less opportunity in the future? Now, I'd start by looking at history. If we look at history, we've always been afraid of technology as a human race. Even back when mainframes were first coming around and computers were first being adopted by organizations in the 1960s and 70s and into the 80s, organizations were worried that computers would take their jobs. As far as I know, computers haven't really taken people's jobs. They've changed people's jobs. They've shifted jobs around, but they haven't really taken people's jobs. It's in many cases created more opportunity, you could argue. It's created a whole new industry of software developers and technicians and other people that support the technology industry. Same with the robotics. We were worried about robotics taking our jobs in the 80s and the 90s. That didn't really happen. Yes, it automated a lot of shop floors and a lot of manufacturing, but quite frankly, offshoring to other countries was the bigger risk than robotics were themselves. Now, if we fast forward and look at artificial intelligence, if we assume that history repeats itself, chances are pretty high that AI won't necessarily eliminate jobs or create mass unemployment, but it is definitely going to disrupt jobs, probably more so than robotics and computers did in the past, largely because AI is changing so quickly, and just the net impact to organizations and to our jobs in general is probably a bit greater than what we might have seen in the past. I've also read studies that suggest that with full adoption of artificial intelligence throughout organizations, the average IQ of the average worker is going to jump significantly. In other words, you're going to have to be smarter to work in organizations, because now you have to be smarter to deal with and interact with artificial intelligence. So the question now becomes, what does that all mean? Is that a net gain or a net loss? And I suppose it depends on you and where you stand and what you do to keep up. If you're knowledgeable of AI and you're knowledgeable of data science, and you really embrace AI and find ways that AI can help you do your job better, chances are pretty high you're going to have more opportunity now than you had before AI. However, if you have a defeatist attitude, or you don't really try to keep up with the changes and you rely on older skill sets that you had that maybe worked for you in the past, chances are that maybe AI will, in fact, create less opportunity for you. So it depends on where you stand, where you are in the market, and really how you approach AI yourselves.
Now that we've provided all this overview of what AI is, how it's affecting ERP systems in the world in general, how we can define an AI strategy and a data strategy to go with it. And then we've also talked about how AI is affecting manufacturing and distribution and careers in technology. Now I want to spend this last module providing a keynote presentation that I gave at a recent industry conference talking about how AI is being used within the manufacturing sector. And this is a deeper dive analysis and a deeper dive discussion than some of the modules we've talked about so far. And this is meant to be sort of a capstone that includes some use cases for how manufacturers are using AI in more detail. So with that all being said, let's jump into this next module, which provides a keynote presentation of how AI is being used in the manufacturing sector.
Real quickly before I get started, introduce myself, just a quick show of hands. How many of you, would you say on at least a weekly basis, use ChatGPT or some sort of, on a personal basis, you use AI or OpenAI, ChatGPT, Bard, Copilot? Okay. How about within your organizations? Does anyone here have like a formal rollout of some sort of AI functionality or capability within your organization, even on a limited test pilot basis? Okay. How many of you have not started anything to do with AI within your organizations, but you're interested in potentially doing it, or you'd like to at some point? Okay, great. Well, that kind of fits where I thought maybe the audience was, as far as a lot of interest, maybe some toe dipping, some trying some things out within AI, both on the personal side and potentially personally as well. And what I find interesting about AI is just how quickly it's permeated the mainstream consciousness. I mean, I've never seen a technology like this where just literally, almost literally overnight, within a year and a half, you've got just widespread understanding of AI. And that's something I've never seen in my career before, even as fast as social media took off, or Google or YouTube. Some of the social media things that we take for granted now, I've just never seen anything catch fire like AI. So this is a super exciting time. And I'm a child of the 80s, so I grew up loving the Terminator. My favorite book to this day is still 1984 by George Orwell. So I have this, on a personal note, I have a love of draconian, dystopian types of stories and books and movies, and sometimes AI feels that way to me. It feels like all the stuff I grew up thinking could happen with technology in the 80s might be starting to materialize, hopefully more in a more positive way than some of those stories unfolded. So today's topic, navigating artificial intelligence, a guided boosting productivity in your business. I'm going to try and get past the pie in the sky, pipe dream type stuff, and talk specifically about how organizations are starting to use AI. And of course, I'd love to hear your feedback too, because this is, as much as I'd love to say I'm an expert that knows everything about AI, I do not, and I am learning along with a lot of you on how AI can actually be applied in organizations. So we're seeing the same thing with our clients, where some are testing out some potential options and use cases for AI. But most of them, I'd say, are struggling with what is it. We understand what it is, but how do we start? What do we start to do to take advantage of some of this groundbreaking technology? So real quickly before I jump in, just a little bit of what we'll cover here today. I'll do a quick introduction to myself here in a moment. I'm going to talk a little bit about a history and just a high-level overview of AI to start, and then I want to get into the benefits and opportunities of artificial intelligence. I want to talk about how AI is affecting ERP systems in general, and then I'm going to talk about how AI is actually being used and deployed with Epicor customers. So I wanted to use, because this is an Epicor conference, wanted to talk about how Epicor is building specific functions using AI and some of the use cases around that. I also want to talk about, for a few moments, the organizational change and the people impact of AI. So what is it we should be thinking about, not just from a technology perspective, but also how we enable the organization to not be afraid of AI and actually get the value out of AI that we hope to see from it. Talk a little bit about the challenges of AI and some of the ethical considerations, and then I want to leave you with a roadmap for how to actually move forward with continuing your exploration and potential adoption of AI. And then, of course, any questions along the way, I actually do not mind at all. In fact, I prefer if I get interrupted because it makes it less boring for me. I get tired of hearing myself after a while, so I'd love to hear your questions and shift gears at any point. So feel free to pop your hand up. I'll keep an eye out for any questions you might have along the way, or we can cover questions at the end as well. So my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of a company called Third Stage Consulting. Third Stage is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm. We're not affiliated with Epicor, nor are we affiliated with any software vendors. We help clients select and implement different types of enterprise technologies, whatever that right technology or technology set is for them. And one of the services we provide is AI strategy and AI implementation, in addition to doing your traditional ERP, CRM, human capital management, supply chain solutions, MES, all that stuff. Today we're gonna focus on manufacturing. How many of you are in the manufacturing and distribution space? Okay, good, because I'm gonna talk a lot about manufacturing, so I was hoping I'd see a lot of hands there. Most of our clients are in the manufacturing and distribution space at Third Stage Consulting. We're not limited to that space, but I'd say 60 to 65% of our revenue comes from manufacturers and distributors. Most of them complex, mid-market to upper mid-market, a lot of them global organizations. And we help, like I said, we help clients select and implement different types of technologies. I've been doing this for 25 years. I started off at one of the big four consulting firms and started Third Stage in 2018, really as a way to provide a tech agnostic option for clients that wanted help with selecting and implementing different types of technology. I felt like there was a need to have someone that really represented clients' best interest, wasn't out there trying to sell a certain product. So even though I'm going to talk about Epicor today, even though I think Epicor is a great product, I am not affiliated with Epicor. Epicor does not pay me. I don't make money from recommending Epicor or any other product for that matter. But so with that being said, I do want to talk about from an agnostic or a technology independent perspective, how AI is affecting ERP and Epicor in particular. Most of my background is actually in change management. I started off my career as a change consultant within an SAP practice of one of the big four consulting firms. So it's kind of a funny story. I was hired out of grad school at a very young age, right when I finished grad school, by this big four firm. And I thought I'd be like a supply chain strategy type consultant, because this is back in the late 90s and supply chain was starting to become a pretty cool discipline, or at least I thought it was. And so I wanted to be a supply chain strategist. But my partner at PwC, where I started, said, I have a different plan for you. You're going to go get certified in SAP, and you're going to do SAP implementations. And I kicked and screamed and said, I don't want to become an ERP consultant. That's the last thing I want to do. I want to do supply chain. And she said, too bad, you're low man on the totem pole. You're going to go to get certified. So I decided to keep my job and go get certified in SAP. But I bring it up because I resisted at first, and which is kind of strange saying that now because I love doing what I do in the ERP consulting space, but I originally did not want to be an ERP consultant because I thought of myself as more of a business change strategy consultant. So what I negotiated over time is, hey, I've got this technical knowledge now. I know how to configure ERP systems. What if I become a change consultant, applying that technical knowledge to change management? And that's how I ended up sort of going down the path of a more change and operations focused side of ERP. So most of my background comes from a lens of business first, organization first, and technology coming behind that as an enabler. I also do quite a bit of work as an expert witness too. So when there's lawsuits or failures in the ERP space, I will testify in court. Although I do have to say, because it's an Epicor conference, I've never been retained for an Epicor-related lawsuit. I don't know if that means they've never been sued, but I've never had to testify in an Epicor-related legal dispute. It's usually SAP or Oracle. Not to name names, but it's usually SAP or Oracle. So just a quick history and understanding of artificial intelligence. Again, AI is so fascinating because it's been around for a long time, but it's just now where people get it. I mean, people are using it day to day. I knew when I saw, have any of you seen the South Park episode with AI? Does anyone watch South Park just in general or have seen episodes? And for those that don't watch it, if you find it offensive, I'm sorry, but I do watch it. I enjoy that show. I enjoy that kind of humor. But when I saw that episode where on South Park, which is usually they're pretty good at keeping up with current events and pop culture and things like that, when they had an episode dedicated to AI and ChatGPT, and they wrote the episode using ChatGPT, I knew that, obviously this has hit the mainstream, and this is top of mind for a lot of consumers, not just businesses. And so I think it's funny because that show actually, in the episode, just to give you a quick synopsis, what happens in the show is one of the main characters, who's a kid, has a girlfriend who doesn't think that he's communicative enough, so he decides to use ChatGPT to text her. Basically, all the text responses, he uses ChatGPT, and he doesn't even read what he's sending back and forth, which is kind of funny, because I actually tried that with my wife, and she did not find it as funny as it was in the episode. And she knew ChatGPT wrote it, too. She said, you used ChatGPT to write that, didn't you? I said, yes, I did. Guilty as charged. But the other part of the story of this episode, too, is that the kids start using ChatGPT to write their homework, and then the teachers start using ChatGPT to grade the homework, And then the principal tries to crack down on ChatGPT, and the teachers don't want them to crack down on it because they're using ChatGPT to grade the homework, and they don't really care that the kids are using ChatGPT to write the papers. So it's actually a really funny episode, but it's actually a good story of how AI not only permeates pop culture in the mainstream, but also how we could potentially be using AI in very creative and non-traditional ways. I'm not suggesting you start texting your spouse using AI, and in fact, I highly discourage you from it based on my personal experience, but it is an option if you'd like to go that route. So AI has been around for a while. It's just now permeating the main sort of pop culture, mainstream culture. But if you think about it, anyone who uses Facebook, you've been using AI for a long time. You may not know it, and it may not be you that's actually using it, but you're interacting with AI whether you know it or not, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. A lot of e-commerce sites like Amazon have been using AI for a long time. So AI has been around for a while, but I think what's interesting is now we are becoming users of AI. Now we have options and tools that we can directly use AI that we haven't been able to in the past, which is why it's so top of mind for a lot of organizations. And because so many of us now are using ChatGPT even on a personal level to get ideas for what to cook for dinner or whatever you might use ChatGPT for, now there's a shift in the B2B space or in the business technology space where organizations are now looking at ways that we could potentially use AI to add value to our organizations. And that's where we're at today. And the other thing that's been around for a while is machine learning. So I know Epicor and other software vendors have been investing heavily in machine learning for years now. And machine learning is a subset and a component of artificial intelligence that, again, has been around for a while, but we're just now getting to the point where instead of machine learning happening behind the scenes, now we've got AI tools that we can interact more directly with to do different creative things with, and we'll talk about some of those things. And then, of course, there's a lot of unanswered questions about AI too. So as we look to where we are today and where we're headed, I'm going to come back to this point, the last point on this slide. I'll come back later. But we also have to think about the ethical considerations and some of the weaknesses or the dark sides of AI. What does it mean for potential job loss or job displacement? What does it mean for potential discrimination in society? Is there any sort of racial bias, sex bias, or gender bias, I should say? Is there anything like that would potentially create biases or problems in society or create more problems in society? So those are some things we've got to think about. That's sort of where we're at with AI. But what are the benefits and opportunities? That's really what I want to get to here today. Is I want to dive into and drive down into how AI is being used from an operational perspective now, and then also how can we decide how we're going to deploy AI in our organizations going forward, knowing that there's a whole sea of opportunity and we're not going to boil the ocean overnight. So how do we get started? How can we take some incremental steps towards doing some use cases and beta testing of AI capabilities? So let's start with the benefits and opportunities, though. Some of the ways that we're seeing organizations use and even just think about AI when they're trying to think creatively about how they're going to start to deploy AI throughout their organizations. One of the first things that comes to mind is it provides a better work experience potentially for employees. Now they can use these tools to do a lot of the work that they had to do manually, a lot of the grunt work they had to do to gather data, to analyze data, and it really speeds up the process to where we can get more productivity and more effectiveness out of employees. So there's a better work experience potential there. There is a potential perceived fear that goes along with it. I'm going to come back to that because there is a dark side to it, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and I think there's a sort of underlying potential dark side that needs to be addressed. We'll come back to that later in this presentation. But another area is better customer service. By being able to manufacture the right products and have them in the right place at the right time to the customers, or doing everything that leads up to that, ordering the raw materials at the right time, having the right demand forecast, being able to production plan and run MRP more effectively. Those are all things that AI can help enable, and there's a lot of different use cases and a lot of different options for use cases within the manufacturing space. But all of that ties back to how do we provide a better customer experience to our customers. Another example, speaking of customer experience, another way that you all have probably seen AI in action is if you ever order products off a website like Amazon or even any of the major retailers, when you go in and you buy something, it gives you recommendations for other products that could be purchased. And they actually have been using machine learning and AI behind the scenes to create those personalized recommendations for you based on mass amounts of data that they've been gathering on consumers throughout the world, and that's how they are able to make those recommendations. So we've always had that sort of customer experience on the Amazon side of things, or the B2B, or the B2C sides of things. But now we sort of have that expectation that businesses should be able to provide that same sort of capability to each other, and also industrial manufacturers and manufacturers of widgets, whatever you might manufacture, your customer, whether it's B2B or B2C, is going to expect that sort of Amazon type of experience, and that's what AI enables us to do with this widespread adoption that's happening now. Supply chain management, same thing. I mentioned the raw materials and MRP and some of the manufacturing specific processes, but you also have just the way you source products, how you're shipping product, all your freight and logistics, being able to optimize all that. It's something that a lot of supply chain managers struggle with, but now AI doesn't make it perfect, doesn't make it easy necessarily, but it makes it easier and provides a lot of increased effectiveness there. And then the last two bullets are more like possibilities of what we could start to see and where we could see AI potentially helping society in general, outside the manufacturing space even, just in our lives in general. It has the opportunity to provide better healthcare outcomes. I mean, that's one that I'm personally excited about, because I think AI could really change the way healthcare is, and some of the outcomes and effectiveness of healthcare. And just imagine if all of us in this room, plus several million other people throughout the world, were able to use their personal health information and use that data and have AI learn from that data to figure out what we're at risk for, or if we have some sort of symptom, what's the most likely synopsis. And right now we're sort of limited by silos of data in the healthcare system, and doctors' siloed knowledge of different disciplines within medicine and healthcare. But AI suddenly could provide a way for us to have a better healthcare system throughout the world. And then climate change as well, being able to do things, whether it's climate change or anything societal that we want to improve as a society. I don't want to suggest that AI is going to fix all the world's problems, but AI is a way and a possibility that, again, using mass amounts of data will help us better understand climate change and where we do or don't have the most impact with that. So those are just a few examples of how AI is potentially improving not only manufacturing, but also the world around us. So now let's talk about how AI is changing ERP systems. So that's just high level what's happening in the world in general. But if we look at AI system or ERP systems in specific, or in particular, let's talk about how AI is changing this part of the world as well. The first is AI is now becoming incorporated into ERP systems. So rather than having an ERP system over here and a separate AI tool over here, now AI and ERP are starting to come together. And again, this is sort of a natural evolution that had already started with machine learning. The optical character recognition, like with AP processing, for example, that sort of machine learning aspect of being able to process and automate processing of invoices, just as one example. That's been in the works for some time now, but now AI is really sort of fast-tracking different ways that ERP systems can provide better capabilities than it ever has before. And part of it is because it's not just about the ERP system now. Now it's about ERP systems and actual outcomes and activities that are happening within those systems, and AI is a way of taking data and actual real-world stuff that's happening, and it's translating that into actionable stuff that we can do as an organization. So AI and ERP are really starting to come together, and that combination of ERP and AI and data, which is going to be the next point here, we throw data into the mix. If we can do those three things really well, that's going to be a super powerful combination that it's a great opportunity for us as leaders to really get ahead of the competition now for once, instead of trying to keep up or trying to upgrade off of a really old system. Now we can think more strategically about maybe some low risk, high value kinds of ways that we could be using AI to further whatever our competitive advantage might be. The other way that I really find fascinating that AI is transforming ERP systems is it's creating this hyper focus on data, which for a long time has been overlooked, and I've always wondered, why don't organizations think more about data? Why don't they spend more time cleaning up data and making sure they get value out of the data? Because that is an asset, it's a competitive advantage potentially, all the data you have as an organization. But so many organizations just either don't spend the time to clean up their data, nor do they spend the time to put governance in place to make sure that the data stays clean and that you have the proper data and people aren't making mistakes up and downstream throughout the supply chain or the value chain. So now with AI, because AI has to have good data, now organizations seem to be reprioritizing the importance of data. And that's the good news too, is I think it was always going to be a benefit to an ERP system to have better data, but now we have a real good reason, which is AI just isn't going to work, or it's not going to work well if we don't have good data. So that's another sort of secondary exciting outcome that we're seeing right now.
Since you mentioned data, I was wondering how important do you think it is for AI to have real-time data from the machines, that the machines that say, hey, I need parts?
I think it's super important. So the question is, how important is it for AI to have real-time data instead of just batch processing of, a day or two later? Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, of course, it depends on what part of the business you're talking about, what industry you're in, and what you're trying to accomplish with it. But, my view is if the faster and more accurately you can get data to an AI model, the more value you're going to get out of it. If you think about a machine, if you have a machine that's on the verge of a breakdown or there's some sort of risk happening because you've had too many cutovers or changeovers on the shop floor in a day, and maybe there's too much wear and tear on a machine for whatever reason, you're working extra shifts or whatever the case may be, to be able to predictively identify the risk and identify when maintenance should happen on a machine, for example, on the shop floor, that's going to rely on real-time data, and you don't want to get that data late and have the AI be out of sync with when. Right, yeah, exactly. You want correct data, and to have correct data, it has to be real time, or else you're operating off of flawed assumptions there. So that's a great question. And I think it's not just improving data so that we can use AI, it's also improving data because, by the way, we just need it to make good business decisions and to understand what's happening in our businesses. So I think this is a great opportunity right now where we're at to sort of kill two birds with the same stone. By cleaning up data, we're getting better prepared for AI, and we're just going to get more value out of our ERP system, even if we didn't use AI, or in areas where we aren't using AI yet. So there's a lot of benefit to a data focus, and I can see why so many kids now are going to college and trying to get into data science. I think it's a great field to be in. I think there's a bright future for it as well.
As far as getting the AI more data and more correct data, where do you find the balancing point before you start providing it too much data, where it becomes more just diminishing returns on the human's part of treating the data that's submitted?
It's a great question. I don't know that there's such a thing as too much data within AI models, or at least I haven't seen that yet. But to your point, as far as gathering the data and finding it, I mean, I would hope that in most organizations that once you find and map the data, whatever it is you're trying to get, it sort of runs on autopilot, and then you've got that access to the data within the AI model. So I think it's valuable. The more data you can give it, I think it's only going to benefit. Now, of course, some data is going to be more valuable than others, and it's not all created equal. But I think having a complete picture of your operations and having all the data through your entire organization, I think is critical. And so much of data cleanliness is a cultural thing that it's actually hard to just fix data in certain spots or to only use data in certain parts of the organization. It's actually easier in some ways just to create a broad culture of data governance and understanding the importance of data and treating data as a real company corporate asset too. So I wouldn't put any limitations on the amount of data you feed into an AI model, especially when you look at all the data on the shop floor with sensors and machines and all the IoT, Internet of Things stuff. And I feel like there's a lot of trends with IoT and Industry 4.0 that haven't really materialized, largely because we haven't had the right tools or we haven't had the right data. So now if we can take the data and consolidate it and centralize it and run it through these models, I think now you can really start to think about Industry 4.0 and like sort of smart factory concepts and things like that are big buzzwords right now, but they haven't really materialized for a lot of manufacturers. There's also employee efficiency. That might be the biggest, most immediate low-hanging fruit for AI right now is just being able to make employees more efficient, giving them tools to where they don't have to search for information or track down information, Now they can be analyzing and thinking and spending more time applying that tribal knowledge they've spent years building. Now they can actually think and make decisions and do more decisions and make more progress towards accomplishing company goals. Because if you think about it, even though employees take pride in their jobs for the most part, I think even if someone who's doing things that could be perceived as low value add, it's value to them because that's their job and they probably take pride in it. So for a lot of employees, this is an opportunity to not be dismissive of the work they've been doing all this time, but now to really take their strengths and let a computer and let AI take a first pass at some of that analysis and data consolidation and decision making, and allow the human or the employees to validate and be more of a director of AI. It's almost like you've just hired a staff of a bunch of people that can support each of your employees that are doing day-to-day transactions. So really scaling up and allowing employees to do more and getting more value out of them is something that's very important with ERP systems and AI, as well as employee effectiveness. So if you think about things like financial planning, demand planning, MRP, all the material resource planning, those are things that are prone to human error, and those are things that are limited by human knowledge. But now if we use AI to help take a first pass at MRP or take a first pass at next year's forecasted sales by SKU, those are things that now it's probably going to do a better job in many cases than any human could, largely because it can process so much data and it can base things on statistics and algorithms rather than just human knowledge and intuition. So the beauty is now we can take better data, better outputs from the AI models, and humans can actually become more of a decision maker and a validator of some of that information. I was hosting a panel discussion this morning, and the gentleman is in the room. I don't want to call him out, even though he's sitting right over there, right in the middle on the end there. He was a CIO panel, and he used a sandwich analogy, and I got permission from him to license me the rights to use this analogy in this presentation right before I came up here. But his sandwich analogy was really good because he said that AI is a lot like a sandwich, and on the two buns, the top and the bottom bread, you have the human interaction, and the meat of the sandwich is the actual AI processing and all the analysis that it does. And then the top of the sandwich is the human directing and putting parameters in place for AI as far as what you want AI to do. And then the bottom of the sandwich is the analysis of the output and the decision making, the human intervention, or whatever you want to call it, that goes along with that. So I thought that was a really nice analogy to where now the meat of manual work now gets done by AI, and humans can focus on completing the sandwich, if you will. So I thought that was a nice analogy that sort of describes how humans and AI and technology can interact, and how important it is to complete the sandwich. Now, the only flaw with this analogy or this metaphor is if you're on an Atkins diet and you're trying to cut your carbs, you probably don't care about the bread. But we'll set that aside and not overthink this, which I tend to do. But I think it's a great analogy.
How does AI account for external factors? So in your analogy, there's a wheat shortage, so it's going to affect the top layer of the bread or something like that, or there's an international conflict, or something as simple as a strike. How do you incorporate that in terms of being able to predict?
So, sort of like unpredictable macro events that
which tend to really throw things into chaos, right? I mean, that's
yeah. Well, I think you're never going to be able to predict the next COVID or a strike in most cases. I mean, maybe some of that you could potentially predict if. I don't know if there's a way yet to where, if you're an organization that's unionized and there's a risk of a strike, I don't know if you could factor that into the AI models or if you could direct an AI model to account for that risk. But let's just say it's a risk that you really can't predict, like another COVID or some other war or whatever it may be. I think the key is not to say we can predict that and avoid the impact, but instead it's to say by having AI, we can identify what the risks are if something does happen. And then when it does happen, it allows us to respond faster and be more effective in how we respond. So you can't avoid it necessarily in some cases, but I think it can make you as an organization more flexible. I hate to use the word agile because it's so overused, but if you become more agile, you become more nimble, you can move faster. I think that's the real advantage, and that it's sort of a cultural shift that goes along with that too.
Quick question. You talk about the data perspective taken gives a refocus on the data in terms of governance and data scrubbing and all that. Have we seen a value creation proposition or use for AI in terms of helping eliminate the data governance or helping doing the data scrubbing?
Yes. So data scrubbing for sure. We've seen use cases already where organizations are able to use AI to merge records, to get rid of duplicate records. If there's something that's in a wrong format, you can identify the master data that might be incorrect or master data that's not being used anymore, and you clean that out. Even just reorganizing a chart of accounts or things that you might go through in a transformation. Also, I know it's not data related, but even just development of code or development of configuration of software, things like that. A lot of that's becoming automated now. And I think what'll happen is you'll see a lot of that, again, grunt work that's being done, hands-on grunt work to configure and build and integrate and test and things like that. That's all stuff that's ripe for automation with AI. And of course, now we've got to think about what's the impact on humans. Are people going to lose their jobs? What about all these offshore centers that big organizations have created, big tech organizations have created over the years? And you're already starting to see some of the fallout from that. A lot of big tech companies have had big layoffs in the last several months because they're anticipating the efficiency gains that come along with AI. So does that answer your question? You bet. Great questions. Thank you for asking. I really do enjoy having questions mid-presentation instead of all at the end. So those are some of the ways that AI is transforming ERP systems. But I want to talk a little bit about some use cases of how Epicor in particular has built AI into some of their various tools in the manufacturing and distribution space, but mainly manufacturing. And these are things you may have heard about in other keynotes. You may have seen some of this out in the Solutions Pavilion. I know they're showing a lot of this downstairs, which is super fascinating, and I look forward to spending more time there again today and tomorrow to get more of insights into what Epicor is doing with this. But some of the ways that AI is being used within Epicor and some other software vendors as well too, in many cases. One is inventory forecasting. So just being able to get your arms around when you need certain raw materials or finished goods or both, and being able to make those predictions, not just based on general, straight line seasonality type analysis, but more based on internal data from your organization, but also external data as well. I think the beauty of where we're at with AI and the cloud combined, this is another, I'd say, secondary benefit of AI, is it is pushing a lot more organizations to the cloud, and it's making cloud investments a lot more justifiable, because in order to take full advantage of AI, you need all this data in a cloud environment to capture not only your own data within your own four walls, but training the AI models that the vendors have in the cloud using data from other customers as well. Now, of course, there's data privacy considerations. I believe, I'm not an attorney, but I believe software vendors typically need to get approvals from customers to be able to use their data as part of the larger AI models. So at least I know that's the case with other software vendors. They've said that they have to have written approval and agreements in place for that. But the beauty of this is that now by moving to the cloud, you have the option of having mass amounts of data and access to mass amounts of data that you would have never had before. And not that you're going to have direct line of sight into your competitors' books, your competitors' confidential information, but you will be able to, in this example, use Epicor not only based on forecasting based on your parameters, but also based on similar manufacturers that have similar outside factors that influence their inventory needs. So inventory forecasting is one area that I know Epicor is investing heavily in AI, and they're starting to see some use cases of customers actually using it for more accurate inventory forecasting. AP automation, I'd say, is a little more mature with Epicor and other systems as well with AI, because they've been using machine learning for some time to automate the processing of invoices and really focusing on exceptions rather than humans approving every single invoice themselves. Financial planning and analysis, being able to forecast revenue, forecast cash flow, forecast obviously sales demand, which influences revenue and all your other financial results and plans. So FP&A, you're starting to see some use cases of AI being built into that as well. And again, if you look at this list as I'm going through them, they're all things that require a lot of data and typically requires a lot of manual processing and thinking to try and figure out the answers to these challenges. Predictive maintenance assistant is another one that Epicor is investing in and has capabilities around, which is using data points from clients or their customers throughout the world that have equipment and have maintenance needs, and being able to predict when certain machines or shop floor machines are going to require maintenance, or predict when they might fail or at risk of failing. So that being able to predict potential downtime and getting ahead of that is something that the predictive maintenance assistant can do. Predictive inventory assistant is another, just again, back to the inventory forecasting piece, identifying when inventory needs to be ordered and identifying potential risks and stockouts. Back to the question around, how do we work around things we can't predict and big unpredictable macro events? Let's just take COVID as an example. When COVID hit, it really exposed the vulnerabilities of the global supply chains, because so many organizations had a single point of failure in the supply chain. It was a raw material provider or some sort of supplier overseas. There was a long lead time that was involved from the time it hit the water until it got to the customer. And AI wouldn't have solved that completely, but what AI can do is identify where there's risks like that. Like, it might be functioning fine right now in our supply chain, but if another macro event does hit, where are the vulnerabilities in the supply chain? Where do we have a single point of failure? Where do we have potential quality issues? Where do we need, potentially to diversify our supplier base? Do we need to have options to bring suppliers onshore suppliers rather than relying just in offshore providers? So those are all the kinds of things that some of this inventory management capability and the forecasting capability can help us solve and answer for. I talked about MRP, being able to optimize how manufacturing schedules run. Again, that's something that's oftentimes very manual. Even companies using modern ERP/MRP systems find themselves doing a lot of manual intervention, a lot of manual analysis. But AI not only streamlines that, but it potentially makes it more effective, because again, we have our own data, but we also have other data from other customers in the cloud, but also even third-party data that isn't from a customer. Things like economic indicators and things like that can also be used. Those data sets can be used to train the AI models as well. Configure price quote is pretty cool. I like what Epicor is doing with this, because configure price quote for complex make-to-order manufacturers. How many of you are complex make-to-order, engineer-to-order types of manufacturers? Maybe half-ish, 40%, 50% of you maybe. So CPQ is pretty cool, because not only does it help you streamline and set the parameters for how you can create and configure a product, but it's also using AI to create some of the other downstream deliverables or processes that need to come from that. So creating a bill of materials based on whatever order you've created, for example, is one area. Creating a CAD drawing automated based on what you've captured in the CPQ. Those are pretty cool, pretty material efficiency gains that a lot of manufacturers can gain, because that's something that's being done manually right now. In many cases, dual entry and dual recreation of information that starts to go away and become streamlined as a result through that CPQ capability. And then knowledge assistant is another one, just being able to find the information you need without having to memorize what screen to go to, without having to create a new report necessarily, and having that more conversational AI component that we're used to with ChatGPT, for example. That's something that's really changing Epicor as well as other ERP systems in the market. So I want to talk just quickly about managing change through AI integrations and AI implementations. And when we're thinking about AI, the one thing we do have to think about is that this is another technological change. It is probably more threatening in many ways, potentially, in terms of perception to employees than other types of technologies. It reminds me a lot of, again, being a child of the 80s. I remember when robots and robotics were first starting to emerge within the business world. Both of my parents, when I was a kid in the 80s, they both worked at Digital Equipment, which no longer exists, but they made computers back in the day. And I remember my dad, who was a blue-collar worker, was worried about what that might mean to his job, because the robots were starting to build all the stuff that he was manually, physically doing. So we do have to think about how AI is perceived and how organizations and people might start to resist it, even if they're not doing it for nefarious reasons. So we have to train employees. Why are we doing this, and how is this going to make their job better? probably most important, we have to have a clear plan, and I'm jumping ahead to another point here, but we do have to have a clear plan and vision for how people's jobs are going to change. I think this is going to be really, really important for AI adoption and deployment, because if people worry that you're going to automate a certain percentage of their job, they're going to worry that they're not as valuable to the company. They're going to worry that they may lose their job. They may worry that all the things you value about them and you've since automated or you have AI doing for you now makes them less important to the organization. And of course, there may be situations where that is true, but I'd say in most cases, it's probably going to be an augmentation and an opportunity to allow employees to do more and to be better at their jobs and to be better performers. But the problem is, if we don't paint that vision of what that means, how are we going to do that with AI? How are we going to scale up your job? How are we going to give you more responsibility or change your responsibilities or the way we measure your performance? Whatever it is, we have to have that clearly defined, or else people, they tend to assume the worst. And again, not because we're all negative, but because if I don't have information, I can put two and two together. If you're automating half my job, no one's telling me what's going to happen to the other half of my job, I have to assume that you might eliminate my position. And so you've got to think that through and paint that vision of what the org design is, what the processes are going to look like, and what people's roles and responsibilities are going to be. Because otherwise, I can tell you AI will just sit there, it'll become the next big buzzword that flopped because it ended up being shelfware and organizations didn't end up using it. And because of inertia and the status quo, people will eventually want to revert back to the way they've always done things. So we've got to fight that inertia and make sure we pave a clear path and paint a clear vision for team members. We've got to communicate benefits, manage the expectations. We need people bought in. I mean, we need buy-in in order for this to succeed. I think the good thing with AI is so many people are hyper-focused on it, from the boardroom all the way down to shop floor workers. So that's pretty exciting to see. I think a lot of investors and board members are sort of forcing organizations to consider AI because it helps with the valuation of a lot of organizations. So because of that, I think it's easier to get alignment than perhaps it might have been with ERP systems. I think in the past, people thought of ERP as a necessary evil or a high-risk endeavor, high-cost endeavor that people weren't a lot of times real excited about having to do. It was sort of a necessary thing they had to do. But with AI, there's a different strategic focus and a strategic urgency that I think is actually going to help organizations get that buy-in and get that momentum, perhaps in a way they haven't in the past. So just real quickly, some of the challenges and ethical considerations. We have to think about this Terminator effect. And what I mean by the Terminator effect, again, that's one of my favorite movies growing up. We have to recognize that, we have to control AI. We can't let AI control us. We can't let AI make major decisions for us. We can't relegate responsibility to AI. We as humans still have to do our jobs. We still have to provide the direction and the validation of whatever it is we're getting out of AI. So we need to understand that, and also we need to combat the fear of AI. As I mentioned before, people are inevitably going to be afraid of AI because of some of the threat it poses. And again, you have to think about those people. I imagine a lot of you have people like this in your organization that have survived through heroics and tribal knowledge. How many of you have that, at least that one person, that one guy, that one gal that they've been there for 30 years, they've got all these spreadsheets and convoluted but effective ways of doing things, and no one knows how it works except for that one person. Does anyone have that person or more than one in their organization? So a lot of you. So, and maybe you've got 10, maybe you've got 100 of them, I don't know. But the point is, if you're that person, that's a big threat to say, well, I've gotten by and made my name here at this organization by being the hero. I mean, despite all the crappy systems and the lack of data, I'm able to make it happen. I'm able to patch it all together, and I've got all the stuff in my head that I know about the company. No one knows the business like I do. And if all of a sudden now that becomes not true because now AI can do it better than I ever did it and faster than I ever did it, that's a threat to me, even though it's the best thing for the organization most likely. So we've got to recognize that and figure out how we overcome that. We also have to understand AI biases and hallucinations. There's still hallucinations in AI. I know one thing that drives me crazy is I use AI a lot. Actually, I use ChatGPT every day for content creation. I do it to create graphics for presentations and things of that nature. And it drives me crazy that when I try to put text on a graphic that comes out of ChatGPT, there's always errors in the text. The graphic will be exactly what I want, but the text is wrong. So there's things like that AI is not perfect. There's still problems with it. It's information you get from ChatGPT or AI models is not going to be 100% accurate, especially as it's learning your business and when you first roll it out. So it takes time for it to learn. And if anyone who's used ChatGPT from the beginning has probably noticed that ChatGPT has gotten a lot better. Just to share my content creation, I used to write 1 blog a week, and now I write 4 to 5 a week because I use ChatGPT to do it. And I've been doing it for a while now, but it's so much different now to where I rarely have to change anything on the AI generated blog because it's exactly what I want, because it's learned what I'm looking for. And I base it on my YouTube video. So I take my YouTube video, the transcript, and I use it to create a blog. I tell it to change some things and add some points here and there, and I don't have to rewrite stuff. So it's come a long way, but it's still not there yet. There's still times where I get a blog and there's something wrong with it. It's not what I said, it's not what I meant in the video, and so I have to go correct that in the blog. So one tiny example of how you still have to be aware that AI is not perfect, and it may never be perfect. And then for that reason, the human perspective is important. So we have to recognize, how humans interact and what their jobs entail, what kind of governance we put in place for AI is going to be critical. So the last thing I'll cover, and then we'll answer any questions you have with the last few minutes we have, how do we move forward with AI? What are some things we can do now to get started? Because it can be overwhelming. I know we talk a lot about it in this conference. I don't think I've been in a session yet that didn't talk or bring up AI within the first 3 to 5 minutes. I mean, it's almost impossible to talk about technology now without talking about AI. But it can be overwhelming because what does it mean? We're not just going to become an AI-driven organization overnight, so what do we do? So I think there's some incremental steps you can be taking. One is to clean up your data and make sure your data is ready. And again, this is not just for AI, it's also going to help you with your ERP initiative, whether you're implementing a new ERP system or whether you're just trying to get more value out of your old system or both. Data readiness is going to help you there. And by the way, part of data readiness is also creating a data-driven culture and incorporating data governance into your day-to-day operation. So that's part of what I mean by data readiness as well. Because we don't want to just clean up the data and then have the same broken processes and the same flawed human interactions that are disrupting or impacting the data negatively. There's a better word than that, but I think you know what I mean. Making the data less accurate. So you want to make sure you've got the processes and the expectations and the awareness in place to keep the data in good shape. You also want to make sure you have the right partners helping you. And I think here's an opportunity to move beyond just sort of your traditional big ERP system integrator and look at organizations that are innovative, that have an understanding of emerging technologies and different ways that you might use technology to enable your business goals and objectives. Shameless self-promotion, third stage consulting is one of those possible options that you might consider for your partner selection. Strategic governance, that's another thing you've got to think about is the program management, how you're going to integrate data, how you're going to manage risks, how you're going to manage data privacy. That's something else we've got to think about is what happens with the data when it goes into an AI model. Is it still ours? Is it still confidential? Are we revealing confidential information that's now being accessed by competitors? Those are all things we've got to think about, especially with data privacy laws emerging throughout the world, especially in Europe to start. And then we've also got to navigate the technological landscape. There's so many different options with AI. Obviously Epicor is investing heavily in AI as we discussed, but you also have a lot of startup types of AI software companies that are out there offering all kinds of different capabilities using AI. In fact, a lot of them are here. A lot of the partners and sponsors and exhibitors here are using AI, and some of them are AI-based software organizations as well. I'll share these slides with you too, to anyone that wants them, so you can take a picture of this one if you want. This is usually one that people want to look at, but this is sort of a roadmap for defining a digital strategy, including AI. And actually, I would say this is a framework you might want to use, not just for AI, but for your ERP project, your overall digital transformation. You'd want to fit whatever technology or technologies you're looking at, you'd want to incorporate into this roadmap here. And the key, I won't go through it all. I'm happy to walk through it with you offline in more detail to anyone who's interested. But the key here is to recognize that there's a lot more than just technology here that we've got to think about. We've got to think about business processes and what our future state's going to look like. We need to think about the organizational impact and how people's jobs are going to change, what the org design is going to be, what roles and responsibilities are going to be going forward. And then what are the enterprise apps that are going to enable this? Is it one core ERP system? Is it best of breed? Are we just going to rely on AI that's in Epicor or in whatever ERP system we have? Are we looking for third-party AI tools? Those are all questions that we need to answer and have a clear roadmap for. We also have to look at solution architecture, how systems tie together, how data flows, how we're going to get the data into the AI models. We've got to think about BI and analytics, which obviously is very much correlated or tied to AI, but just having that visibility into your organization and your operations and being able to access it using AI is another important aspect. And then, of course, project quality assurance to make sure your project stays on track. So that's hopefully some ways to start thinking about how we can actually start the journey towards AI, and hopefully that shared some insights as to how organizations are starting to take advantage of some of the capabilities within AI. I'll open it to questions now, and I'm happy to stay after because I know we're up against time right now. I'll stay here. In fact, I'm presenting here again in 10 minutes. I have nowhere to go, so I'll be here. But in the meantime, as we wrap up, if you scan that QR code right there, there's a resource center on our website. You can get a ton of free downloads, white papers, digital strategy type stuff. You can follow me on YouTube as well. If you don't follow me on YouTube, you can do that here, or just search Eric Kimberling on YouTube. You can find me there. I put out 3 to 4 videos a week on ERP, AI, tech agnostic, stuff like that. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. I'll take any questions you have these last couple minutes, and then we'll wrap up. Any other questions or things we didn't cover that you hoped we would?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on a singular independent AI approach rather than embedded AI within multiple systems?
That's a great question. So question is, what about AI as a standalone versus AI embedded into like an ERP system?
Multiple systems, they have one independent OpenAI versus
Yeah. So AI does have the potential to give you some immediate value on legacy systems if you're in a best-of-breed environment. So it does provide an option or a possibility of gathering data from multiple sources and analyzing it. So there is some low-hanging fruit there. So I don't know that the one's better than the other, but I think it is an option to use a standalone AI to rely on your legacy systems. The one downside limitation is going to be you just don't have the same access to mass amounts of data via the cloud if you haven't moved to the cloud. So it's a good short-term interim potential advantage, but I wouldn't suggest it as a long-term strategy necessarily. But if you're going through a 2 or 3 year implementation, you could use it as a way to get value right now with what you've got.
So I hope this has provided you some good guidance and deeper dive understanding into AI and some practicalities and use cases of how it's actually being used today, as well as how you might consider using it longer term in the future. And if you'd like to learn more about emerging trends and other types of digital transformation topics, I encourage you to read our 2024 Digital Transformation Report. It's an annual report we publish each year that dives into some of the trends and emerging technologies, as well as top 10 rankings from an independent tech agnostic perspective of the different systems that are out there in the marketplace. And you can download that by scanning the QR code right here in front of you, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.